Kellan Easton shoved his arm through the sleeve of his tailored black coat as he stormed out of his mansion, barely catching the door before it slammed behind him. He was late, again. His driver was parked at the bottom of the marble steps, engine idling, headlights on. But as Kellan looked at the sleek town car, something inside him snapped. The idea of sitting in the backseat, being driven to yet another networking event filled with fake smiles and empty conversations, made his chest tighten. "Tell Greg to take the night off," Kellan muttered to the butler standing by the door. "I'll walk." "Sir?" The man blinked, confused. "I need air." Kellan didn't wait for a reply. He turned and headed down the long driveway, hands stuffed in his coat pockets, cold wind cutting across his face like a slap. It was nearly midnight, the chill of late fall biting through his clothes, but he didn't care. He needed to breathe. The mansion was too quiet, too big, too full of things that didn't matter anymore. His life had somehow become a checklist of success stories Forbes features, venture capital wins, a waterfront estate, but none of it felt real anymore. He took a turn down the side street that led toward downtown, shoulders hunched, head down. Then it happened. He collided with someone so hard they both stumbled back. A small body, soft and warm, yelped as a bag full of papers and books spilled across the sidewalk. "Watch it," the woman gasped. Kellan blinked, startled. I'm sorry, I didn't see you." She was crouching already, trying to gather her things. Her long brown hair tumbled over one shoulder. She had on a puffy green jacket that looked about 3 winters old, jeans with a faded knee, and sneakers that had seen better days. She looked like she belonged to this city, not the elite circles, but the heart of it. "I didn't mean to hear, let me help," he said quickly, kneeling to help her scoop up the papers. "You're lucky I wasn't carrying coffee," she muttered, but not unkindly. He handed her a dog-eared book. Their hands brushed. She looked up. Big hazel eyes met his. Kellan froze. There was something about her, something unfiltered, something real. She cleared her throat. "Thanks." "I really am sorry," he said again. She exhaled, standing. "It's okay, it's late." "I wasn't exactly watching where I was going either." "Are you all right?" he asked, eyeing the way she was rubbing her elbow. "Just bumped it. No broken bones," she said, brushing herself off. "And you?" Kellan gave a soft chuckle. "Ego slightly bruised." "That's all," she laughed, and it was the kind of laugh he hadn't heard in years, genuine, unpretentious, warm. "I'm Kellan," he added, instinctively offering his hand. "Jessa," she replied, shaking it. "Jessa Whitmore." He noticed her fingers were cold, no gloves. "What are you doing out this late?" he asked. She hesitated, then lifted a plastic bag from the ground. "I just finished my shift at the library. I work evenings. And I tutor on the side, so I usually walk home. Saves bus fare." He frowned. "You walk alone at this hour?" She raised a brow. "It's not like I have a choice." "You shouldn't have to choose between safety and saving a few bucks." She tilted her head. "You sound like someone who's never had to count quarters." He didn't reply. She smiled a little. "Sorry, that was rude." "No, it's honest," he said. "Well, thanks for not being a total jerk about running into me." She stepped back. "I should get home." "Where do you live?" he asked before he could stop himself. Jessa blinked. "Why? So I can make sure you get home safe." She gave a small laugh. "What are you, some billionaire in disguise?" Kellan smiled but said nothing. She squinted at him. "Wait, you look familiar." He took a step back. "Probably just have one of those faces." "Right." She didn't look convinced. "Let me at least walk with you," he offered. She hesitated. "I don't even know you." "I just told you my name." She studied him for a second, then nodded slowly. "Fine, but if you try anything sketchy, I've got a mean right hook." He grinned. "Noted." They started walking, their shoes crunching over fallen leaves. "So, Kellan, what is it you do?" "I run a few companies." "Tech, mostly. Let me guess. App that tracks your avocado ripeness." He laughed. "Not quite, more like investments." She nodded. "Must be nice." "It has its perks, but it's not always fulfilling." She glanced at him. "Then why do it?" He shrugged. "Because I'm good at it, and sometimes that's enough." She didn't say anything for a while. "Then, I get that. I'm good with kids. I tutor because it helps, even if my bills still scream at me every month." You're working hard, he said quietly. I'm trying. My mom's sick and I send most of what I make to help with her meds. Something twisted in his chest. You're kind of amazing, he said. She laughed. You don't even know me. I'm starting to. They reached a small apartment building. The paint was chipped and the porch light flickered. This is me, she said. He looked up at the building, then back at her. Can I see you again? Jessa hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a piece of paper. She wrote down a phone number. I don't do texts, she said, but you can call me. He took it, folding it carefully. I will. She looked up at him once more. Good night, Kellan. Good night, Jessa. She disappeared up the stairs. Kellan stared at the building for a long minute before turning and walking back the way he came. For the first time in a long time, he felt something stir in him, something warm. Something hopeful. He didn't know it yet, but bumping into Jessa Whitmore had just changed everything. 2 days passed before Kellan called her. He didn't know why it had taken him that long. Maybe it was caution or maybe it was fear. The kind that crept in when something unexpected knocked the breath out of you and left you wondering what it would mean if you chased it. But he called, and she answered. Now he was sitting at an outdoor cafe across from Jessa, trying to ignore the fact that he hadn't been to a place like this in years. The tables were mismatched, the chairs creaked, and the coffee was served in chipped ceramic mugs, but it was full of life. Laughter spilled from the kitchen window, and someone was playing acoustic guitar on the sidewalk nearby. Jessa stirred cream into her drink with the tip of her spoon, then glanced up at him. You look uncomfortable. I'm not, he said too quickly. She raised one brow. You just checked your watch 3 times in the last 10 minutes. He lowered his arm. Force of habit, she leaned back. So you're one of those always-on guys, meetings, calls, spreadsheets? Only when necessary, and this is not necessary, it's necessary, he said, meeting her gaze. Jessa blinked, surprised, then she tucked a piece of hair behind her ear and looked away. You're hard to read, you know that, I've been told, he said, but I'm trying to change that. Why? He hesitated. Because the way I've been living, it's not enough anymore. She didn't press him. Instead, she tore a piece of her croissant and popped it into her mouth, chewing thoughtfully. So, she said after a minute, I Googled you. Kellan set down his cup with a quiet clink. I figured you would. Didn't take much. Kellan Easton, CEO, multiple companies, investment firm. Your name's on a building downtown. Technically 2 buildings, he said, then winced. That sounded worse out loud. No, it sounded accurate, she said, but it also sounded lonely. He looked at her. What makes you say that? Because when I read all those articles, everything was about your achievements, your money, your strategy, but none of it said anything about the kind of person you are. And what kind of person do you think I am? He asked. I don't know yet, she said. That's the part I haven't figured out. He leaned forward slightly. Then let's fix that, Jessa smiled, but it didn't reach all the way to her eyes. I can't be someone's hobby project, Kellan. You're not. I've had enough people come and go in my life. People who promised things, people who wanted to fix me or save me or turn me into someone else. I don't need that. I don't want to save you, he said. I want to know you. Her expression softened just slightly. That's a better answer. They sat there for a moment, letting the sound of the street fill the silence between them. Then she asked, What about your family? He looked down at his coffee. My parents split when I was 10. My father left. My mother raised me on her own for a while. Then she remarried. I went to boarding school when I was 14. Did you ever see your dad again? Once, briefly. He wanted money. Jessa's mouth pressed into a line. I'm sorry, I'm not. It taught me who not to become, she nodded slowly. That makes sense. He looked at her. What about you? You mentioned your mom was sick. She has lupus, Jessa said. It's manageable, but the medication is expensive. She can't work. I help out where I can, but it's hard sometimes. I moved back home after college, took whatever jobs I could get. I thought I'd have more figured out by now. You're doing more than most would, Kellan said genuinely. I'm doing what I have to, she replied. There's a difference. A waitress passed by and refilled their water glasses. Kellan barely noticed. Can I ask you something? He said. Jessa looked at him. Sure. Why aren't you angry? She blinked. Angry about what, life? The cards you've been dealt, the things you've had to give up. Because anger doesn't get me through the day, she said. Hope does, and caffeine. That made him smile. She added, besides, I've seen what bitterness does to people. It drains them. I don't want to become someone who only sees what's missing. That's rare, he said quietly. Jessa shrugged. It's survival. He didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't. Instead, he reached for the check, but she stopped him. Don't do that. Why not? Because I can pay for my own coffee. I know you can, he said, but I want to. You don't have to impress me. I'm not trying to impress you, Kellan said. I'm trying to be present. She studied him, then let her hand fall away. All right, she said, but next time it's on me. There's going to be a next time. Jessa stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder. That depends. On what? On whether you call again, she said, and then walked away down the sidewalk, her steps light but certain. Kellan didn't move for a long moment. His phone buzzed on the table, probably some notification from the office, but he ignored it. Something about the way she had looked at him stayed with him, even after she was gone, not with awe. Not with judgment, but with a challenge, and Kellan Easton had never turned away from a challenge in his life. Kellan tapped his fingertips on the steering wheel, staring up at the narrow brick building across the street. The lights were still on in the second-floor unit, faint and golden against the dusky skyline. He hadn't intended to drive by. He'd told himself he was just clearing his head after an exhausting meeting. But the truth was, he wanted to see her again. And he didn't want to wait for some socially acceptable reason to do it. The passenger door creaked open, and Jessa climbed in with a puzzled look. You're early, she said, glancing around the inside of the charcoal-colored Aston Martin. And you didn't say anything about it being this. I figured I owed you a ride in something that doesn't rattle when it turns, Kellan replied, easing the car into gear. You know, most people give flowers. I thought I'd mix it up. Jessa let out a breath somewhere between a laugh and a scoff, then looked out the window. Where are we going? It's a surprise. That's not ominous at all. I promise it doesn't involve secret basements or cults. Good. I left my escape rope at home. He glanced at her, the edge of a smile tugging at his mouth. You always like this sarcastic. Only when I'm nervous. They merged onto the expressway, the city lights flickering in the rearview mirror. Jessa folded her arms, but her voice was softer now. Why me, Kellan? What do you mean? I mean, you could be with anyone. Women who wear designer shoes and go to galas and know what to do with words like arugula foam. I'm not that, I know. Then why are you still here? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into the center console and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to her. She opened it carefully. Inside was a ticket cream cardstock embossed with gold lettering. An art show, she asked, eyebrows lifting. Not just any art show, local artists, underfunded programs. Private event. And you're bringing me. I'm sponsoring it, he said simply. Jessa turned the ticket over in her hands. You didn't mention you were into art. I'm not really, but I met a young painter once barely out of high school. Her work was incredible. She couldn't afford paint half the time, so I bought her entire collection at once. Changed her life. She's showing tonight. Jessa looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. You really don't like talking about the good things you do you? I don't do them to be talked about. The car pulled into a gated courtyard tucked behind a converted warehouse. String lights crisscrossed above a brick path lined with sculptures and glass pieces that glowed under the soft bulbs. Music played inside low jazz, paired with the murmur of conversation. Kellan stepped out and came around to open her door. All right, Jessa muttered, smoothing her sleeves. Just tell me if I get spinach in my teeth. You'll be the most real person in there, he said, offering his arm. They'll be lucky to have you. Inside, the space was a swirl of color and texture canvases leaning against the walls, installations hanging from the ceiling, and people in sharp suits sipping champagne. Jessa stayed close, her eyes wide but alert. A young woman with long braids and paint-smudged hands ran up to Kellan, throwing her arms around him. You came. I wouldn't miss it, he said, stepping back. You remember what I told you. Don't let anyone tell me it's not art if it doesn't match their couch, he laughed. Exactly, the artist turned to Jessa. And who's this? Kellan's guest, she said, offering her hand. Jessa. You're lucky, the woman said with a grin, then turned back to greet a group approaching from the other side of the room. You've been doing this a while, haven't you? Jessa said after a moment. Kellan nodded. Quietly. I can see that. They wandered through the room, pausing at a painting of a mother and child in a tangle of colors and shadows. Jessa tilted her head. This one hurts in a good way, Kellan nodded. It's hers. She painted it after her mother passed, Jessa blinked. That explains it. They stood in silence, absorbing the weight of the piece. Then Kellan said, You're not what I expected, neither are you. I've been around a lot of people who want something from me, money, connections, favors. You don't ask for anything. I don't want anything, she replied. That's what scares me. Jessa looked over at him. Why? Because if you're not trying to take, then you could actually matter. She didn't respond right away, then she quietly said, You matter too, you know, even if you've forgotten how. That night, after the event, he didn't take her home immediately. They drove without speaking for a while, the city slowly thinning behind them until they reached the overlook above the river. He parked without a word and opened the door for her again. The wind had picked up, and she pulled her coat tighter around her as they stepped toward the railing. The skyline glittered in the distance, reflected in the black water like a promise. I used to come here when I was younger, he said. Before the money, before all of it. What changed? I started winning, and then I forgot what I was playing for. Jessa leaned on the railing. You could still remember. He looked at her, the city's reflection dancing in her eyes. I think you're helping me do that. She turned toward him, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. You don't have to be someone else with me, Kellan. Just be the guy who brought me to a rooftop full of struggling artists and made me feel like I belong. He stepped closer. You do belong. Their breath mingled in the cold air. And for a moment, the world narrowed to just them, the wind, the water, the quiet thump of two hearts that had been waiting for something real. Neither of them moved. But for the first time in years, Kellan didn't feel the pressure to fill the silence. Because with her, silence finally meant something. Jessa climbed the steps to the rooftop garden slowly, her breath catching not from the height, but from the sight of what waited at the top. Dozens of candles flickered around the perimeter of the terrace, their glow casting soft light on the trailing ivy and wrought iron trellises. In the center stood a small table, set for two, beside a low fire pit that crackled gently. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something sweet like cinnamon. She turned to Kellan, who stood a few steps behind her. You did all this? I had help, he said, stepping forward and gently taking her coat. But yes. I wanted tonight to be different. She took in the view. City lights stretched far and wide, the river winding through the skyline like a ribbon of silver. You've been full of surprises lately. I'm not trying to surprise you, he said, leading her to the table. I'm trying to be honest. Jessa sat down, looking at him across the table. Then tell me something you're afraid to say. He didn't flinch. I don't know what this is supposed to look like, her head tilted slightly. This, you and me, this feeling. It's not something I've let myself want for a long time. Jessa folded her hands together, resting them on the tablecloth. You think I do? He gave a quiet laugh. Probably not. I don't, she said. But maybe that's the point. A server appeared silently, setting down 2 plates of roasted vegetables, grilled fish, and warm bread before disappearing again without a word. Kellan reached for his glass. I used to think love was a distraction. And now I think the lack of it was. She didn't speak for a moment. The fire crackled between them, casting light over her features. I almost didn't come tonight, she admitted. Why? Because I'm not used to things going right. The second something starts to feel good, I start waiting for it to fall apart. He leaned forward slightly. You don't have to wait for that with me. You say that now. I'll say it tomorrow too. Jessa picked up her fork but didn't eat. What happens when your world and mine collide? Because let's be honest, Kellan, they're not the same. They don't have to be. People like me don't end up with people like you. People like me don't even know who they are until they meet someone like you. She stared at him, caught between disbelief and something deeper. You don't even flinch when you say things like that. Because they're true. Jessa finally took a bite, chewing slowly. You're not what I expected. Neither are you, he echoed. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the kind that no longer pressed in with awkwardness, but stretched out as a kind of comfort. When the plates were cleared, Kellan stood and extended his hand. She looked at it. What now? Come with me. He led her to the far edge of the rooftop, where a small platform had been set up with a single violinist waiting patiently. The player lifted the instrument and began a soft, slow melody that hung in the night air like a secret. Kellan pulled her gently into his arms. Dance with me. I don't really dance, she said, but didn't pull away. Neither do I, he whispered. Their bodies moved slowly, almost without rhythm, but in sync nonetheless. Her cheek brushed his collarbone as he held her close. The city blurred behind them, and for a moment, the world faded to nothing but the music and the warmth of his hand on her back. Your life isn't small, Kellan, she said quietly, and I don't want to disappear in it. You won't. I don't want a life that makes you smaller. I want one that makes more room, she looked up at him. I'm not a prize to be won, I know, he said. You're the reason I stopped playing. The music slowed. She rested her forehead against his chest, breathing him in. You're not who I thought you were. I hope I'm better. You're real, she said. That's enough. Later, he drove her home. No words passed between them until he walked her to the door. The hallway was quiet, the only light coming from a distant stairwell window. He stopped, not quite ready to say goodbye. There's something I want to ask you, Jessa waited. I don't want this to be some whirlwind that burns out in a few weeks, he said. I don't want to go back to who I was before I met you. You don't have to. I want you to come with me, he said. Not just tonight, not just this week. I want you in my life, all of it. She blinked, caught off guard. Kellan? He didn't step closer or reach for her hand. He just looked at her open, vulnerable in a way that told her this wasn't a line or a moment meant to impress. I know it's fast, he said, but I don't care. I've spent years building a life that looked good on paper and felt empty in my hands. You changed that. Jessa's voice was barely above a whisper. I don't want to lose myself in you. You won't, he said. I want to build something where we both get to be more. She studied him, searching for the crack in the surface, but he didn't waver. Okay, she said. Then let's try, he exhaled slowly as if something inside him had just settled into place. Come with me next weekend. I want to show you where I grew up. Why? Because it's the last piece of me I haven't shared, Jessa nodded. Then I want to see it. They stood there for a moment longer, then she leaned up and kissed him, not rushed, not uncertain, but with quiet certainty. When he finally walked away, his heart was pounding, not from nerves, but from the unmistakable feeling of something real beginning. A week later, they stood together on a quiet hilltop outside the small town where Kellan had grown up. The air was crisp, the sky wide and open. He pointed to an old white house with a sloped roof and a porch that had clearly seen better years. That's where I learned how to run fast enough to dodge my stepfather's bad moods. Jessa looked at him carefully. And where did you learn how to build empires? He pointed to the same house. There, she said nothing, just reached for his hand. He brought her close, his voice low. I've been chasing power for a long time. Turns out what I needed was permission to be soft again. Jessa leaned into him. You don't need permission. Just someone who sees you. He kissed her then, slow and sure, while the wind moved through the trees below, and when they drove back to the city that night, it wasn't in silence or tension. It was in the kind of comfort that only came when two people had stopped pretending to be anything other than exactly who they were. When they pulled into her block and he walked her to her door again, he didn't ask to come in, and she didn't invite him. Instead, she smiled and said, "See you tomorrow." And he answered, "Every day after, if you'll let me." She nodded, and with that, the door closed softly behind her. Kellan turned and walked back to his car with something he hadn't carried in a long time: peace. Not the kind that came from success or power or control, but the kind that came from finally being seen and loved. The first time Jessa stepped into Kellan's penthouse, she didn't say a word. Not because she was overwhelmed, though the two-story windows, marble floors, and the view of the skyline stretching out to the horizon could certainly do that to a person, but because she was trying to understand what it meant that he'd brought her here. She walked slowly, her fingers brushing the back of a leather armchair, her eyes catching the glint of a sculpture nestled between shelves lined with books and awards. Kellan stood a few feet behind her, watching quietly as she took it all in. "You're not going to say anything?" he asked. She turned toward him. "I'm trying to decide if it feels like you," his brow lifted. "And it doesn't," she said. "It looks like someone who forgot what quiet feels like." He let out a breath and came to stand beside her. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." She turned her head toward him, confused. "I want your help," he said. "With all of it, this place, my life, it's full of everything except the things that matter. I want to make space for what does. I'm not some design consultant," she said, half teasing, but her eyes were serious. "I don't want a consultant, I want you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled something out, a key, silver, plain, unadorned. "I'm not asking you to move in," he said. "Not unless you want to. I'm just saying you don't have to knock anymore." Jessa looked at the key in his hand. "This feels like more than a gesture." "It is." She took it slowly, her fingers curling around it. "I don't want to lose myself in your world." "Then let's build a new one." Together, weeks passed. The rhythm between them became something steady, something real. Kellan didn't cancel dinners anymore. He stopped carrying his phone into meetings unless it was necessary. He started driving himself to work, not because he had to, but because he wanted the space to think. He thought about her, about the way she rearranged the furniture in his living room so it faced each other instead of the television, about how she insisted on adding a tiny second-hand bookshelf beside his designer console table filled with worn novels she loved, about how her laughter filled the space like it had belonged there all along. One afternoon, Kellan walked into the library where Jessa worked and placed a sealed envelope on her desk without saying a word. "What's this?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "Open it." Inside was a formal letter typed and signed. "You started a foundation, it's already funded," he said. "Fully for 5 years. She read the name aloud. "The Whitmore Initiative for Youth Education. Tutoring, scholarships, resources for underfunded schools." Her hand trembled slightly. "Kellan, it's yours to run," he said. "If you want it." Her voice caught. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep changing lives. Starting with your own." She stood from her chair and walked around the desk. "You didn't do this for me." "No," he said. "I did it because of you." That night, they celebrated not with champagne or caviar, but with takeout on the rooftop of her building, legs tangled under an old blanket, the scent of jasmine from a neighbor's garden drifting on the breeze. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You scare me sometimes." "Why?" "I keep waiting to find out this isn't real." "It is," he said, "and I'll keep proving it to you, every day." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the key he'd given her. "I haven't used this yet." "You don't have to." "I want to." She placed it in his hand. "But not just to come and go. I want to use it because that place is ours now, if you mean it." He looked at her, heart hammering. "I do," she smiled, slow and sure. "Then let's stop waiting." 3 months later, the small wedding took place in the rooftop garden of a restored building Kellan had purchased downtown. The same violinist from their first dance played softly as Jessa walked down the aisle, her dress simple but stunning, her eyes never leaving his. Their vows weren't rehearsed. They didn't need to be. "You changed the way I see the world," she said, her voice steady as the wind lifted a strand of hair from her cheek. "You showed me that love doesn't have to come with conditions. That I can be exactly who I am and still be more." "I used to think love was a luxury I couldn't afford," Kellan said, taking her hands into his. "But you taught me it's the only thing worth investing in." When he kissed her, the city stretched wide around them, but nothing felt quite as vast as the promise in that moment. Their first home together wasn't the penthouse. They sold it. Not because it wasn't beautiful, but because it no longer reflected who they were. Instead, they bought a brownstone a few blocks from the library. One with creaky stairs, sunlight in the kitchen, and room for a nursery. The Whitmore initiative expanded across the state within a year. Jessa ran it with quiet passion, refusing to let Kellan interfere beyond funding and listening. He did both, gladly. He didn't talk about quarterly returns anymore. He talked about outcomes, mentors, stories. About the kids who reminded him of the boy. He used to be the one who ran from shadows until someone finally stood still long enough to see him. One evening, after the sun had dipped below the rooftops and their small garden was filled with the hum of crickets, Jessa curled up beside him on the porch swing. "You know what I realized today," she said. "What? You never tried to save me. You just stood next to me until I realized I could walk on my own." He wrapped an arm around her. "You've always been stronger than you knew, and you've always been softer than you let on." They sat there in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. The kind that came after storms had passed, when all that was left was the gentle sound of something lasting settling into place. Kellan kissed the top of her head, Jessa closed her eyes, and the world, for once, didn't need to be conquered. It just needed to be lived. Together.